Okay. So, today's video is going to be more so a live lesson than it is going to be me doing readings. So today I wanted to talk about some lessons and teach a few things. So for today, and yes, I know I rarely ever teach, but I teach in various ways. Hey Denise. Hey Janet. So today's little lesson is going to be on the shamanic point of view. Again, this also deals in the animal kingdom and the spiritual. And that's going to be the main focus. Is going to be the elements. The communication between what we would consider humans and the spiritual and physical worlds. And yes, I am going to be talking about the shamanic world tree for you guys as well. So, to get into this understanding, in the shamanic point of view, hey Tyler, there are 3 worlds. Each of these 3 worlds have their own branches, their own subgroups and divisions and things like that. However, there are 3 main aspects in this world tree, this Yggdrasil, or this shamanic tree. Again, we have what is called the lower world, or what would be considered the underworld. The middle world, which would be this physical world. Then you have the upper world, which includes all the other worlds and dominions and things like that. Also, the things of the heavens. It becomes complicated after you get into that little subgroup. But when it comes to these 3 worlds, these are also equivalent to what the Chinese Taoists would consider heaven, earth, and man. So these 3 worlds, especially in the Taoist tradition, the Tian, or the sky, the heavens, is the upper world, which is everything that resides above this plane of existence. So take the very earth, the ground that we step on. The heaven, or the realm of heaven, exists above us. So again, this is sky. Sky is vast. It is unmeasurable, innumerable, and eternal. Whereas the earth is attributed to everything beneath the earth, rather than what is here. So the earth is everything that is beneath the ground. It is the underworld. It is all that is hidden. It is the minerals, the rocks, and even the sea itself that resides in the earth. So basically everything in the underground is the realm of earth, whereas everything in the heavens and the sky, including the other planets, the sun, the moon, and all that, resides in the heavens, the realm of sky. Then the realm of man becomes complicated, considering that it is a mixture of the 2. This is the physical world. This is what is and where we reside. So in this same mixture, there is a little poem or philosophical quote that goes along with these 3 worlds, according to the Taoists. 1 gives rise to 2, 2 gives rise to 3, and 3 gives rise to all things. So when you think about this, 1 and 2, yin and yang, heaven and earth, gives rise to 3, 3 being man. Again, if you think about it, the humans, us, are born of earth and sky. Our body, our physical form, our physical essence, derives its yin energy, its feministic energy, its negative energy, from the female polarity, which is of the earth. However, the thing that gives us life, that sustains our very essence, is our ki, or our chi, our very breath. Our breath comes from the realms of sky, the realm of heaven. Through the mixture of heaven and earth, you create the physical manifestation of the mortal world. Again, this also goes for all other species, all other beings, including the fish and things like that. All things derive from heaven and earth. Nothing is separate from it. Not even the other entities or beings that reside beyond our perception. Again, this is the more basic term, but when you get into the lower realm, the upper realm, you start to get into these other dominions, which the rules change. Yes, the rules do change slightly and sometimes drastically, but they all derive from heaven and earth, from a mixture of yin and yang, or positive and negative energies. So when we go into the lower world, this would be considered the underworld, the place of the resting, the place of spirit. This is also the place where you would find your ancestral spirits, the spirits of the deceased, the place where you would find your kind of like spiritual guides sometimes, namely your ancestors, family members, and loved ones, yada yada yada. Then we have the middle world, the physical and tangible world, which this one tends to shift and differ depending on dimensions, depending on worlds, because every world has its own tree, every place has its own laws, its own essence, its own code, or its own rules. Doesn't matter. No matter which dimension, no matter which world you go to, that place becomes the middle world. Again, it has its own physical essence that kind of goes beyond our own understanding. However, that physical world is everything that goes on around us, especially for us. So this middle world is the earth in which we know. However, this also is the place where we meet the elementals. So the elements of fire, water, earth, and air, which are the Western basic elements, versus the Chinese fire, wood, metal, water, earth. Or I think I got all of them. Hold on. Fire, water, earth, wood, and metal. Those are the Chinese 5 elements. Again, every other element kind of differs, but these 5 and 4 are what we most know. So this is the place where we also meet our spirit guides, or our animal companions, namely the place of the medicine animals. This is where we connect to all other living things, from plants to animals, to the fish of the sea, to the stones, the rocks, the crystals. This is the physical world. However, once we get into the upper world, the place of the heavens, this is where it kind of goes in branches, because we're on the world tree, on the shamanic tree. The underworld is the roots of the tree. The middle world is the trunk of the tree. But the upper world splits and becomes more so, not troublesome, but it's more difficult to explain, considering that everything branches off, becomes its own unique divergence in the spiritual sense. So when it comes to the upper world, this is where we get into the spiritual. This is where you find your spirit guides, your other beings, other entities that exist beyond our own physical understanding. These creatures, these beings, these entities exist beyond our physical perception. This is why they are in the upper world. However, each branch, each world takes its own form, takes its own shape. It's its own unique realm. They have, think of it like they play a part in our world, but we also play a part in theirs. Where we have our physical, their physical is totally different from us. But each world is its own tree, which becomes complicated considering, but it's like a giant tangled web, more or less. But each of these worlds interact, just as all other worlds interact. Just as everything has its synchronicities, has its rhythms, its rhymes, its tempo, its pace. No matter what we do, there will always be a cause and effect. So to get into this little topic, let's talk about the elements. How many of you guys know that you guys can communicate with other beings, other entities, or even learn to understand the whispers of the winds, to hear the crackle of flame, to understand what everything means, and to comprehend and to speak to the elementals, to the nature itself? See, in today's world, many people have taken for granted the gifts of the earth. Everything that was, that is, that will be, that is not, will not, and shall never be. Everybody takes for granted the gifts, the blessings, the fortune given from the earth. And in this same understanding, what we as humans would consider speech is speech. How many of us know that other animals are actually more intelligent than we give them credit for? Again, the little definition between instinct and intelligence is a very thin line. So again, with this thin line between what is considered intelligence versus what is considered instinct, what truly is the difference? Some people would say that intelligence resides on the ability of thought, the ability to have this consciousness, this awakened state of awareness of self and others, whereas instinct is deemed to be more animalistic. The aspect of not having this consciousness of self or others, but truly being in essence without thought, just living, just doing. So again, with this difference between being animalistic and being conscious is more so like a diversion of what is greater or lesser than one another. Well, in the grand scheme of things, in the beginning, there was nothing greater or lesser than one another. Again, to be conscious or asleep is a diversion path created by humans, by entities, to not just describe, but to gain control over their own reality. Again, everybody wants to be better and the masters of their own world. and I don't give a shit who you are. But everybody wants to be above others, to have the final word, to have the final say. And in this same understanding, once we get into this topic, there is no difference between being instinctual, relying on instincts, versus being conscious. Again, just as there is no difference between being awake or asleep. Everything has its purpose, everything has its place. So how does this play a role in today's topic with the elements and the spirit animals and things like that? Well, let's get into this because it's one of my favorite topics. So when it comes to how it plays its part, if an animal couldn't be conscious, how would it become a spirit guide? If a spirit guide wasn't conscious, how would it become a spirit? If a spirit was not conscious, is it truly there? Is reality as we see it really reality, or is it an illusion? This is where it gets tricky, considering that all things is an illusion. All things are nothing, yet it is everything. And yes, it sounds like I'm being cryptic, but in its elegant form, it causes the mind to think. All things are nothing, yet nothing is all things. Everything is, was, and is not, was not, and could not be. However, all things exist in unity. So, when you think about it, heaven and earth, the realm of man, sea, land, and sky, the elements, fire, water, earth, air, metal, wind, all these other elements exist. All these different natures exist. Stones can cry, stones can feel. However, they can also die when there is no more life left in them. Animals feel. They feel sorrow and sadness. They feel pain and suffering. And why am I saying this? Is because humans forget that they are not greater than any other being. We are not above the others, but we coexist with them. Or rather, we should be coexisting with them rather than destroying them. But in this same essence, especially with speech and intelligence, what truly is intelligence? Well, let's just say intelligence doesn't get anybody anywhere. It just leads to further stupidity. Whereas true intelligence leads to unity, peace, and compassion. So, for example, all other beings have their own way of communication. We all know this. All other beings communicate in their own way. So, for example, dolphins have their own voice, their own song. Whales have their own songs, their own voice. We have our own voice. Doesn't matter what dialect we change it to, be it English or what have you, it's our voice. Again, all other languages diverged, but it's all our voice. Birds chirp. They have their own song, their own voice, their uniqueness. That is theirs. Doesn't matter who or what we are. We all have our ways, our beliefs, our traditions. That is what makes us who we are. However, once you diverge and you separate yourself from the fact that nature is a part of us, that we are a part of nature, that we are nature itself personified and given life, you start to see things in a new way. Again, we could communicate with all the other beings if we were willing to sit and listen, to understand, to feel. All animals, all other beings, all other creatures, all stem from emotion, all from heart and mind. But if we were willing to let go and to stop thinking, to overdo and to stop overthinking the most simple of things and just let ourselves connect to truly and heartfelt feel between ourselves and other beings, other species, and we allow ourselves to reach this same wavelength, we would be able to communicate clearer with others. Again, this is also the thing that is taken the most for granted, especially in today's world. The reason why we have so much miscommunication is because not everybody is on the not everybody's on the same wavelength or the same wave. Nobody is on the same wavelength at the moment. Everybody is everywhere. Think of it like an orchestra whose conductor no longer knows how to conduct the orchestra and is not just off tempo, but they're shooting the wrong notes at the wrong time. And it's causing all this chaos, this destruction in its wake. How does this make sense comparing what is going on in the world today to music? Well, if you think about it and you sit and listen, there's music in the air no matter where we go. The winds whistle, they have their own sound. Whenever a storm is brewing, thunder and lightning roar and crack. The drops of the rains when hitting on things sounds like music, if you're willing to sit and listen. However, even the noises of the earth, the whispers of the birds, all has its own music, has its place. Even we have our place. But we've taken it for granted. Which gets into the other part, that yes, we can communicate with all these other animals if we were willing. And yes, we do have our part, our place in creation. So, for example, to understand the element of fire, the art of passion, the art of desire, we must understand that everything that fuels us is also a part of us. To understand the earth, it's all about stability and support. So everything that supports us, our bones, our very body, our flesh, our muscle, helps to sustain us, give us form. Just as it gives us all these other creations, these physical and tangible objects. The element of water is all about fluidity, which again reminds us to be flexible, reasonable, and to go with the flow rather than to be obstructed, find a way around it. New beginnings, never ending. So being a circle within a circle with no beginnings and never ending. Whereas the element of air reminds us of the gift of freedom, the gift of all that is. However, this is also the very essence of not being weighed down, the act of true freedom, the ability to roam, to not be in one spot or one place for too long, the need for the nomadic lifestyle, which again I would much prefer, but it's unfeasible considering that it requires large amounts of people to be able to get the roaming style done. Because again, one person isn't going to be able to roam forever by themselves. But everything has its season, everything has its cycle. This is why the Native Americans back in the day were nomadic. They roamed. Again, they understood that you can't stay in one spot for too long, or you would damage the environment and everything, and that basically damage what is there. You would harm the balance of nature if you stayed in a spot too long and you caused and overhunted and all this other fun stuff. Which is also another key understanding, is that when you look at all these different cities, these towns and things like that have been in places far too long, what damage has been caused? What shifts in the environment have been created? So take Phoenix, for example, where I live. Take it for example. So it's been here for quite some time, about 113 or 100 and something years. I can't remember how many years, but over 100 years. What damage has been incurred? So, for example, we've already lost a lot of our old farmland. So there is no more farming much here anyways. And whatever farms are left, they're small as hell. But due to the city expansions and shit like that, the heat becomes overbearing. This heat keeps away the clouds, if you will. It's the only way I can explain it. So it rarely rains in Arizona, or particularly in Phoenix. Again, we no longer have thunder or lightning over the city, but we don't get heavy rain either. We don't get the storms like we used to. Whereas if you go further up north towards, let's say, Kayenta, or on the reservation, the Navajo reservation for Kayenta and all that places, where it is open, there is no housing or towns or cities or things like that. Well, when it rains over there, it downpours, and by downpour I mean really does downpour, to where the clouds black out the day and day turns to night. Thunder and lightning roar and crack. This is the heavy rains. Whereas the normal rains that we now get here in Phoenix are more like subtle. They're just on and off. Not downpour, not nothing. They don't darken the day. They don't turn day into night. But it's dry. Always dry. Meaning the earth's thirst never quenches. But yet it sustains just a little life. Unlike how it was over 100 years ago, where life could be found in abundance. Even the coyotes here in the mountain behind us have gone thin because we've expanded into their territories. They come through the trailer court over here every few nights, and I will admit I do actually give them meat here and there, and I do leave food out for the coyotes, but that's just because I understand. There's no more rabbits or other meaty things that exist on the mountain over there. And I know how hard and how scarce food is, considering that just on this side, on the west side, they're building more houses, and there was actually a den of coyotes that lived over there that I had been friends with. and they were chased out of their home, and they ended up moving a little bit further up the mountain, but they still come down to play. And their children are actually very cute, I will admit, especially when they're yapping and they're prancing around and dancing. But even they got pushed out of their home and to a place that doesn't suit them. Then take all the other creatures, the other beings of this earth. How many homes, how many habitats have we, us, humans, destroyed for our own benefit? How many of us humans have destroyed the habitats of other creatures to create what we desire, to fuel our ego that we wanted to expand upon? How many have overdone it on things that we don't need? For example, take the Amazon rainforest for one of the older examples of destroying. But take all the other forests, Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, all of these other places in Central and South America, where these expansions are destroying nature in order for them to build upon extravagant buildings and other crap that we don't necessarily need. All these different buildings, how are they in balance with nature? Let's take a look at it. So, how much of nature has to change until we're satisfied? How much of nature has to be destroyed until we get what we desire, or to fuel our own ego, our own pockets? And this reminds me of a quote that my older friend used to tell me, is that the golden one's heart is worth more than the golden one's purse. This is true. Because when you think about it, the gold of one's heart, that truth, that serenity, that peace, that tranquility, that compassion, is far more worthwhile than any amount than any amount of money there is. However, just as much as one can be sweet, compassionate, and caring, humans also have the ability to be the most vile, most evil of all creation. They have the ability, instead of turning their heart to gold, turn their heart to coal. Again, this is where you get the black heart, the heart so dark, or the coal black heart. This is where that comes from. But that black heart is filled with negativity, bitterness, anger, hatred, all that is evil. It becomes the deadliest of poisons for all who partake of it. Whereas the gold heart, that which is filled with peace, tranquility, compassion, becomes the best of cures. The gold and black heart, agreed. Yes, agreed. So take these two hearts, these two aspects, the gold and black. They can counteract one another. However, sooner or later, that black heart, that greed, that negativity, that envy, all that is evil, can corrupt and damage the heart. Which is also why it's best to protect the heart and to protect the mind. in protecting the heart and mind, we sanctify and protect the very soul, the very essence of who we are. Again, in order to be spiritual and to have this spiritual cognition, we must be conscious at all times. The ability to not just let go, but to push our very existence out of this physical form into another tangible form of spiritual energy. However, this also allows us to feel, which through the mixture of mind and heart creates this astral or etheric body. And yes, I'm not going to go too much in how to do it or what have you, but it plays its part. But out of these two pills, both are necessary. Because again, without that bitterness, without that anger, that pain, there could be no advancement into achieving this total state of awareness or understanding. Again, to become the Buddha or to become a Buddha, you must suffer and sustain all the damage of the earth. Doesn't matter. This also leads into the necessary steps of detachment to let go. Again, the ego, the physical self, doesn't really matter when it comes to the spiritual essence, but it plays its role on an individual aspect. Again, in the larger view of the world, ego isn't necessary. It doesn't matter. Because again, once you start working as a whole, you're not just yourself, you are everyone. The benefits and everything that is meant to be worked on has to be as a group, not just an individual person, but everyone as a whole. Whereas the ego on an individual level is of yourself, who you are. It is meant for you, nobody else. So once you start to understand that difference between ego and everybody else, you start to understand how these two forces interact. So again, what would you do unto others that you would do unto yourself? How would you want to be treated? So too shall you treat yourself. If you hate others, you probably hate yourself. If you love yourself, you probably will love others, and others will love you in turn. Again, this give and take exists, this push and pull. And in this state of nature, the more we take of nature, the more we take from ourselves. So if you guys are getting the picture, all the animals, all the fish, the birds, the trees, the stones of the earth play their role, play their part with one another. Again, this planet is of itself one being. Everything is of each other. Nothing is separate. I don't give a shit if you think that there is dark forces, light forces, I don't care. They are all necessary. They all play their part. They all have their strings to be pulled. They all play their purpose. They all play their part. But the moment that you allow that ego to drive the whole will of creation, you done fucked up. Because once you allow ego into this broader will of creation, there's only a few people who would be able to manipulate it to the point that it leads to our own destruction. Again, ego has its own tiny will, its own little tiny cog in the grand scheme of things. Because each individual ego turns this larger will. If you guys are getting the point of this, is we are not separate from all others. We are one thing. We create the larger will. However, our individual wills are our own. Nobody else's, doesn't matter. However, we all influence one another. But we must hold responsibility and accountability for our own actions. Again, understanding the self and not implementing the self upon others. This also goes for other animals, other creatures. Humans are the dumbest. Even though we can be considered the smartest, we're the dumbest. We are the stupidest of all creation compared to some of these other beings, these other animals. Humans are the dumbest. We really are one of the lowest on the totem pole. But no, humans, I kid you not, humans are a superficial species. They think themselves better. They think themselves above nature. But let's be honest, there's no escaping. Yeah, they are the most selfish, the dumbest of creatures. But let's just be honest. Humans are superficial. We think ourselves above nature. That we can manipulate nature. That we are not susceptible to nature's laws. Again, we've forgotten the laws of nature and the natural law, the divine law, the laws that exist, the laws that were, that will be, and will ever be, that are so and are not. Humans have forgotten the law, which will lead to our own destruction. But no, the greatest lesson is that everything plays its part. All things are the larger will. The entire earth is that will. This entire world is the larger will at play. We, as the dumbasses, play a small portion in this larger will of things that we've taken for granted. And yes, I'm going to downplay humans so fucking hard because humans are dumbasses. So I'm going to simply state, humans are dumbasses. We are the cog in the machine. We are the cog in the greater will of things. We are the dumbasses breaking nature and breaking this will and keeping it from turning. We are the dumbasses who are going against the natural flow. We are the ones who are causing the most damage. We are the ones who have gone beyond our respective place. Again, we are the problem. I don't give a shit. You guys can say that we're not, but I have not met any other being on this earth, born of this world, that has caused more damage than humans. And I don't give a shit if you're saying reptilians, draconians, Pleiadians, what have you. I don't care. All the other races, I don't give a shit. Because they have their own parts to play. The only thing that's different is humans allowed greed, envy, ego to become center-driven. We allowed all this negativity, all these outside influence to turn that little pill in our heart into the worst of poison. We've allowed this poison to boil and to cure and to spread like plagues to the children, to the children's children, from generation to generation. We've allowed this pill of negativity to fester. However, at the same time, there isn't enough gold pills in this world to cure everybody. I don't care. Because that black pill is far more deadly than the cure. And the cure can't save as many people without the people falling victim or prey to that same negative pill, to that poison. Because again, the person that is wanting to be cured, to step away from this ego-driven poison, doesn't protect themselves or do anything to refine or to give rise to their own golden pill. And if you guys are still wondering, and if you guys are just jumping on, the difference between the gold and black pills that I'm talking about is the medicine of the heart. Again, the golden one's heart is worth more than the golden one's purse. The black coal is the deadliest of poisons. I'm not going to tell you guys the whole story, but a heart made of gold is the best of cures, whereas the most evil and darkest of hearts is the worst of poisons. But you guys get the point. Humans are both the savior and the destroyer. We are that mixture. Doesn't matter. Humans are the dumbest. Doesn't matter. We will always be the dumbest. Just the most stupidest of creatures. But if we are willing to refine this golden pill, this miraculous cure, and share it from generation to generation, and to properly teach this medicine, this way of healing, the understanding of nature, the other beings, the other creatures, the understanding of the elements, the natural order, the natural laws, the universal laws, that cure will eventually dissipate this ego-driven world back into a state of peace and tranquility. Again, this would take so fucking long to truly make an impact, considering that not a lot of you guys are able to differentiate the self and others interchangeably while still maintaining this unity-like consciousness versus the self-consciousness, which becomes more and more confusing. But, to put it simply for those guys who are just joining, the ego is of the self. It is who we are. Just us. Do not, and I repeat, do not put this into somebody else, something else, into other animals. This is just as it is. It is this. It doesn't matter if an animal doesn't think or talk or feel the same way we do. They have their own thing. They have their own way. We have our own way. We are on different paths. Doesn't matter if it's a bird, a fish, a four-legged, two-legged, three-legged. Doesn't matter. Everything has its ego. And yes, everything really does have its own ego. But that's them. You don't see the trees trying to tell us that we should stand still, plant our feet in the earth, and do nothing, just stand. You don't and you do not see animals telling us that we need to hunt or eat a certain way. You don't see birds telling us that we're dumbasses, that we can't fly on our own, yada yada yada. You don't see the wind harassing us because we aren't as fluid or as open and free as the wind. You don't see fire tormenting us because we're not hot. We're not this burning bright essence. You don't see the earth itself, and by earth I mean the physical soil, the stones and things like that, telling us to do anything. Nature is of itself. The nature of ego and the ego of nature is as it is. Nothing of nature has ever forced itself on others. Nature's ego has never forced itself on others until humans grew ego mixed with that unity consciousness of one another to derive itself above nature, to transform and manipulate nature. Again, this is the dumbest thing that anybody has ever accomplished and utilized. But again, ego of the self has its importance because it reminds us that we are important in the grand scheme of things, in this bigger cog, in this bigger will of creation. Again, we play our own part. No more, no less. This gets into the fate and destiny aspects. Again, everything is divined, or rather, everything is pre-written to an extent. This is what we would consider fate. Everything is fated for a reason. However, there is also destiny. Destiny and fate often intertwine. When fate and destiny intertwine, it's for a purpose, it's for a reason. Fate is fate. It is as it is. There is no changing it. There is no stopping it. It is as it is. No changing fate. However, destiny is endless. Because again, you could meet me now, watch this live now, but never watch me again. That is destiny. That is as it's meant to be. You're only meant to hear it this one time. Just as I am meant to meet everybody one time or another. Again, whether or not our paths re-meet or re-intertwine depends on destiny. Depends on choice. It depends on our decision. Whereas fate is predetermined. We are meant to be in this particular place at this particular time. Whether or not destiny reunites us depends. This is the purpose. It is the essence. It is the aspect of nature that is the most difficult to understand. Again, ego of self is deriven from heaven and earth. It is deriven from fate and destiny. Again, we want to be the best, but is that really the best? Considering that we have our place, we have our own limitations. Why are we going to force ourselves, to go beyond our own limitations just to satisfy our ego? It's the dumbest thing that was ever taught to humans, to be honest. But no, once we start to understand discipline, dogma to its true extent, we start to understand the need for these things, the need for laws and regulations, the need for restrictions on certain things. Because without these restrictions, ego would run rampant, which would lead to more and more of the dark pills, the black pills, that would lead to our eventual destruction. So, to wrap up this video, cultivate the gold pill through peace, love, and compassion. However, and I'm saying however, 8 folds the wicked reed fulfill, and you harm none, do as you will, unless attacked ye may be. There's a difference. So, it's not saying that you have to be peaceful 100% of the time. You have to know how to defend yourself. You need to know how to defend. Again, defense and attack. Opposition, defense plays a part. Push and pull. Without these two essences, nothing can truly move. Just as much as you know how to defend, you must also know how to attack. Doesn't matter. Even the Buddhists know and understand that in order to protect ourselves, we have to know how to fight. However, even though they stick to the bow staffs and things like that, it is a reminder that all life is sacred. You must never take a life unless it is truly necessary. And I'm saying this. It's never good to take a life unless it's truly necessary. Again, life and death. I say leave that up to fate. Whether or not that it's meant to be or not depends. But it gets into a complicated story. But everything is as it needs to be. Doesn't matter. So long as we remain true to ourselves, we allow our ego to drive our own will, our own life, without allowing our ego to influence or manipulate other people's lives through our own understanding. Again, not projecting and not forcing them to fit into our own perspective of what we think is best. We should only be working on ourselves because our life is our own will. Whereas when it comes to that unity and that working together, it's through that understanding and letting go of ourselves and thinking of how each of these individual aspects work best with each other rather than against. What is it that we can all do together to maintain this prosperity, this abundance, this natural growth? What would be best for everybody rather than just ourselves? But with that being said, you guys, I will end this live here. And I will probably be live tomorrow, depending on how I feel, for some live readings or maybe another lesson. We'll see. So again, love and light, you guys, and blessed be.